Today on the Self Smarter podcast.
If you look at all the memes and information out on, Instagram and all the things that we love to consume, you can feel like I'm just a 7. But we are much more, intricate beings than that. Hi, we're Danelle and Megan, the hosts of this conversation-centric podcast for leaders seeking to be better every day. Whether you choose to be a leader in the workplace, at home, or in your community, we believe the most effective leaders are equipped to not only be self-starters, but self-smarter.
Hello and welcome to Self Smarter. I'm Megan and this is my friend and co-host Danelle.
Hello, everyone.
Hello. So we have a treat for everyone. We have an Enneagram episode, which is...
Yeah, a 2-part series.
Yeah, today is just part 1. So we'll have another one coming next week. Yummy, yum, yum. Enneagram still tends to be the most listened to content.
Okay.
Other than when we have guests.
Yes.
We have guests, people tend to like that, and they also like Enneagram. So we're serving this to you today.
Yes.
Dear listeners. And before we start, I wanted to talk about how my Enneagram, knowing myself better, helped me navigate a really tough situation over the weekend. So we haven't talked about this on the podcast, nor would we, but I've been grieving.
Yeah.
Been grieving for the last 2 months. My father actually passed away in June of 2023. If you're listening to this in 2026 or 3001, hey, this just happened in 2 months ago. So in June 2023, we decided as a family that we were going to not have like a big funeral, and instead we would pause and have a celebration of life soon. Okay. Well, what I learned about that is that as a 9 on the Enneagram who worries a lot about the way I'm seen, and I go to, worst case scenario, I go to 6 in stress, which means I worry a lot. That just gave me permission to worry for 2 months along with the grieving. Yeah.
Worrying about this
like logistics, the perfection,
you wanted it to be special.
I did.
To honor your dad.
For him. Yeah. I wanted to put together a big tribute video, and I wanted everyone to have a good time. I mean, there's a lot that goes into those things, and this is me speaking vulnerably. Last week, I was still in that headspace, like the perfection headspace, and I knew it.
Oh, yeah.
Totally knew it. I was like, you need to stop beating yourself up, and you need to, and you need to. And then this other pole, which I believe is my 9 with my 1 wing, which is the perfection. They're not called the perfectionists anymore, but ones used to be. We really like that. That makes us comfortable when things look okay.
Oh, yeah.
Look good. Even though you might be falling apart on the inside, which is precisely what was happening to me. So I'm driving into the office one day. This is last week. So days before this event is going to happen. And I'm listening to We Can Do Hard Things, episode 233, which is Glennon Doyle and Abby Wambach's podcast. If you haven't listened to this podcast, what are you doing? Like, listen to the podcast. Listen to We Can Do Hard Things. Episode 233 doesn't look like it's going to be an episode about speaking at big events. Or speaking from your heart. No. It's called.
So you thought it was safe?
Yes, I thought it was a safe space. I'm going to listen to this, and it's called What's Next at We Can Do Hard Things. So I'm listening to it. Well, they get through like the first 15 minutes, and that's all they want to do. They just want to tell you that they're about to go on a break, and it's over. For a minute, it's over, And then they go into their dad giving this speech, and he was surprised. They surprised him. And what they found was that the delivery of the speech came more from the heart because he wasn't prepared. And they were just enamored by it. And Glennon talked about just being in the moment and like putting all the worry aside, because she worries like I do about perfection and things having to come off a certain way. And so I really leaned into this notion. I started to think, well, I've got to apply this weekend. I've got to eulogize my father in front of a large group of people. So there's public speaking, there's event planning, and there's actually getting up and spilling your guts all over the front of the room, right? Yeah. In terms of your heart. Am I going to do this reading, or am I going to do this from the heart? I really wanted to do it from the heart. And listening to, We Can Do Hard Things, they really encouraged it. Yeah. But when it got down to go time, I called an audible
Okay.
with myself and I go, are you in a state right now where you can do this? Like it's like I'm getting up there to grab the mic. And I was like, self, no, you're not. You know what? And that's okay.
Right.
That's totally fine. Read from the paper and then just do what you know to do when you speak. All the things that we just talked about in our recent episode. Make eye contact, add humor, be prepared, da 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 da.
Oh, our episode on public speaking.
Yeah, on public
Because
speaking.
it essentially was that, but then there's like 80 layers of
Other
everything
things.
else. So, yeah.
I just let all that perfection go and I just let Megan show up.
Right.
Like really who I am and really who I was raised to be. Mm-hmm. And it was the most authentic thing I think I could have done. And as a result of that, people were like, wow, that was really special. Mm-hmm. That was really something. Mm-hmm. My uncle did the same thing. My uncle had no notes.
Oh,
He also eulogized his brother,
okay.
my dad. He was very entertaining. Well, then I started thinking like this celebration of life has been entertainment.
Right.
It was so interesting. And because of that experience, I feel so cleaned, like this big boulder's been lifted and all of what I said was so real. So I took what I have learned as a leader, a self-smarter leader, we try every day. And I tried to apply that in a scenario where I was extremely uncomfortable.
Yes.
I did not know what was going to happen. And not because of everybody else, mostly because of myself and anxiety and all those things, and grief, just stacking up and perfection. And then I just decided in the moment, no, you're not.
Yeah.
This is you. Everyone here loves you.
Right.
And so just be you.
Right.
And so it really felt like a growth moment. Like I'm standing there with the microphone and I'm talking about my father and I almost said out loud, y'all, I think I'm growing right now. Like this is growth.
Well, I know, and I'm really glad you took that approach. And we talked
Yes, we
leading
did.
up to it, and when you made that declaration, of I think we talked through you giving yourself the permission to. I was like, you already know what you've already written it, so you already know. Why don't you give yourself the permission to do whatever you feel like?
Yes.
When you get up there, which sounds like I'm so
did.
glad you did that. I didn't know what version that was going to.
Right.
I didn't know
I didn't
what I
either.
was saying.
Right.
Because I've unfortunately had to give eulogies before, so I know, not in this context, but I know the weight of that, and so I'm glad you gave yourself and everyone there that gift of authentic you.
Yeah.
Because authentic you is amazing. I don't think we can ever show up as our authentic selves in the best possible way without any preparation or thought. Okay. So to me, the fact that you were prepared and you had thought about it gave you the ability, right? It's the ability to then, okay, I need to do it this way. You had options when you got up there because you could always read what you wrote and that would have been beautiful. And I'm sure what you wrote is beautiful because I know your writing and I know your heart and I know how you felt about your dad and feel about your dad. So the fact that you gave yourself some options, and I think that's the self-smarter moment. So thank you for sharing that. I sometimes don't know what you're going to open up with and never know how things are going to go. So I'm grateful, and I know our listeners will be grateful just for you sharing that because everyone cares about you deeply, and for first and foremost for us to keep you and your family in our thoughts continuously, but then also just to use what you've learned. And you continue to learn about being self-smarter and applying it to something, one of the hardest things you'll ever do in your life. And allowing it to serve you and others. I mean, people, that's ultimately what this is all about. I mean, you talk about it in that sense, and in my sense, I think about the mom that I am today. It was never a bad mom, but the mom that I've become because I know myself better and how I can navigate that relationship with my daughter, that's because I chose to be a better leader, but it bled into the rest of my life. Now, I'm not saying that I haven't severed relationships because of what I've learned about myself. I was in some unhealthy ones. I was in some healthy ones that just didn't serve me anymore as well.
Right.
Or them. And so there's no downside, is what I'm saying, to getting to know you in all the parts, the light, the shadows, like all the parts of you. There's just not a downside to that other than it being uncomfortable as hell at certain times.
So true.
So thank you for sharing that. That means a lot. I know it means a lot to me. I know it means a lot to our listeners. So thank you.
Thank you for letting me.
Yeah. Well, I didn't have an option, but I wouldn't have stopped you anyway.
Thanks. I appreciate the trust. All right. Before we jump into our Enneagram discussion about wings, let's hop to this quick advertisement. Well, we've been teasing you for weeks now about what's new and what we've been working on for you, pod listeners. And today I have an update. We've created new tools and coaching opportunities to help you on your leadership journey. If self-improvement is what you're looking for, we can help with that. If team coaching is something you're looking for, hey, we can help with that too. It's all available to you at beselfsmarter.com. And the best news is we're still working on more. We know how big the need for leadership development tools can be for anyone starting or those of you who have been leading for a long time and just want to hone your skills. Danelle and I would be so happy to work with you. Visit beselfsmarter.com and take a look. Okay, today we're talking about everyone's favorite personality test, the Enneagram. Mm-hmm. When we're teaching about the Enneagram, we typically focus on the main 9 personality types, and we spend less time talking about the part of the assessment that is critical for getting to know yourself better, and that's your Enneagram wings. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little bit more about Enneagram wings.
Well, first of all, I know technically the Enneagram is a assessment about our personalities.
Yes.
But it is much more nuanced than that. And I think that is why we are so pro Enneagram, is because it's designed not to put you in a particular box. It's the number one resistance that we get when we talk about the Enneagram.
People think that's the truth.
Oh, for sure. Most personality types do. I mean, tests do, or assessments do that. The Enneagram, you definitely have a dominant number. Sometimes a test will help you determine that, but most of the time it's your self-study. Some of us take the test, we get our results back. I mean, I couldn't deny that I was a 7. There's no deniability. Yet you tied 2 and 9, and you had to do some research because you could see yourself as both. But yet you almost had to go to the less attractive part in order to realize that you are indeed a 9. And now you completely show up as a 9. Like, I can't imagine you being a 2. But at the beginning I can read the surface of it and be like, oh, okay, right. Same way with Drew being a 9 and a 6. And so at the beginning I was like, yeah, he could be either one. He is completely a 9.
Yes, he is.
But he does go to 6 in stress. And so it makes total sense to me then. But again, dominant numbers are critical to the foundation of who you are. But what I love about the Enneagram is there's relationships that we have with all the other numbers. And so when Marcy teaches about, who's, our insider Enneagram expert, she's dedicated a lot of her personal time to learning a lot about this particular subject and teaching us and us all learning together.
Right.
But the Enneagram is more about a spectrum. And so if you imagine a spectrum of colors, and then there's millions of combinations that can happen. The Enneagram 9 numbers are that way too. It's the way we utilize all of them to move through our world. So it's not just what we know about ourselves, it's what we understand about how we're wired, our desires and our hopes. So it is much more comprehensive once you determine what your dominant number is. So every number, again, has relationships with all 9. The important thing to know is they're really beyond your dominant. There are 4 other numbers that impact you. And those are where you go in stress and where you go in growth. So you can go back and revisit our first, I think it's episode 6, the first Enneagram we did. We talk in depth about those particular where we go in growth and stress. And then your wings. So if you've never looked at the Enneagram, just type it into your phone real quick and type in Enneagram image. You will see that it resembles a clock with a 9 being at the top. And it's literally, that's what Enneagram means, is 9, Enneagram, a graphic. So your wings are the numbers on either side of your dominant number. So for instance, I'm a 7. Okay. I have a 6 wing and an 8 wing. Megan, you're a 9. You have a 1 wing, which you spoke to earlier, and you have an 8 wing. Right. So, and that's that simple. It's not difficult to determine what your wings are at all, or where you go in stress, where you go. But and all of that to say, this once you determine what your dominant number is. So, and what makes the wings so special is that your wings influence and complement your dominant type. So and like I said, it's adding these additional nuances about who you are so that you're not just you're not just an 8. And I know if you look at all the memes and information out on, Instagram and all the things that we love to consume, you can feel like I'm just a 7. But we are much more, intricate beings than that. And I believe that this assessment celebrates that more than most. That's what I believe to be true. And so what I also know about our wings is it can provide us additional information to our traits, tendencies, and behaviors that are secondary, but again, they still make you what we are. Yeah. Very unique beings. Right. We are unique human beings.
All the variables come into play there.
And all the variables come into play. And I can give examples of this, but just an easy one is that, when I would struggle in the business before I understood that I was an Enneagram 7, I would have these moments of just sheer fear. Go to the dark side. I couldn't see any positiveness. And then there were moments where I could be a confident, bold leader. And I didn't understand that those were my wings, the dynamics of my wings at play. So as an owner of this business, you're damn right, my 6 wing plays a lot because my 6 wing has to be thinking of the worst and the best case scenarios. And that's what 6s do. They're prepared. They're the preparers. And so there's that aspect. And then me as a CEO, the confidence, at times the aggression to power through certain things, that's my 8 wing. And once I understood that about myself, it was almost like I could forgive and accept my own being. Now, that doesn't mean I need to keep in the traits of any of the negative, I hate to use that word, but the inevitable parts of every number. I have to be aware of when that is happening in my 6 wing, when it's happening in my 8 wing, and certainly in just my dominant number as a 7. So that's just a little bit of pre-context before we dive into what the wings can actually do for us in deeper study.
Okay. And before we talk about the wings and the individual wings and get specific, I would like to say about why they are so interesting and important to fully understand yourself. So here's what the Enneagram wings specifically are that are so special. So there's the subtle variation, meaning wings provide a way to understand the subtle variations within a single Enneagram type. For example, if you're a type 6, which is called the Loyalist, having a type 5 wing or a type 7 wing will add distinct flavors to your core type 6 characteristics.
Okay. And so along that line, so that's the subtle variation. Can't get that word out today. There's also this nuanced behavior. Right. So your wing influences how you express your core type's motivation and fears. I mentioned that earlier. It can affect your behavior, reactions, and coping mechanisms. This adds depth to your understanding of your personality and how you will respond to different situations. Hence the example that I gave.
That's right.
I have different roles in my life, so it makes sense that based on my Enneagram type, that I would use other numbers to navigate those things. Right. And the point is the understanding, so the self-knowledge, therefore the self-awareness, is that's when it comes into play, when we can understand this, again, this spectrum of who we are.
Right. Okay. So that was nuances. Then there's also the blend of traits. That's what makes the wing special. So the presence of a wing creates a blending of traits from your core type with the wing type. This blend makes each individual's personality unique and helps explain why people of the same core type can still exhibit different behaviors. So this is where that almost like the nuances come to play in the blending, because we can often get thrown off. Like we'll have someone labeled and then we question ourselves. Well, this is where that comes into play. There's a blend.
Right. And there's also where that person is on their own journey. It could be a season of life. Like we have Mackenzie and Hannah in our office that are both type 8s, and we can certainly see their similarities, but they're extremely different at times. And watching them both be young moms together gave us another layer of understanding and what they were challenged with, and, you know, how they're leaning into those roles. And that's where, if you really...
So neat.
It is, because you can understand in many ways how they could be struggling potentially, or what we need to do to support them. You can't support them exactly the same.
Right.
Even though they're both type 8s. We have to understand more of the nuanced aspects of who they are in order to fully show up for them.
That's right.
And again, before we continue to go on, I know this is a lot. This is literally next level Enneagram learning. And wait till the next episodes when we start to get into subtypes, which I was asked about recently. You know, when are you going to get into the subtypes? And that's someone who's obviously spending a lot of time on the Enneagram, because it's more in depth. So moving forward and relative to the wings, the wings also help us understand our growth and stress patterns. So wings also play a role with how you respond to stress and how you grow personally. So in times of stress, you might display behaviors more typical of your wing type. And in times of growth, you might lean into the positive aspects of your wing.
Right.
And what that means, as I said, every dominant number goes to a specific number in stress and a specific number in growth. Depending on where I am as a 7, if I'm leaning into my 6 wing, then when I'm in stress, I could go to a 9. Right? So I can, 9s, when 6s go to stress, they go to 9, which means they can get paralyzed almost. And I can tell you that as a business leader, an owner, let me say that, as a business owner, there are times where I'm so heavily leaning on my 6 wing that I can see myself being paralyzed. I didn't understand that. I didn't know that. I just was beating myself up going, you're weak, or you need to move forward. You need to just keep on going. Now I'm able to say, why are you paralyzed? And what does a 6 need to do to get out? They need to lean into the confidence of their 3, where they go in growth, which is their 3.
And trust themselves
more. So again, these are just... It's a way to, at many times, especially when we're struggling, to allow ourselves, hey, this is naturally what our reaction's going to be. That doesn't mean we have to stay in that space.
That's right.
Right? This is free will.
That's right.
But free will doesn't mean a darn thing without knowledge and understanding. That's right. So,
and empathy.
Yeah.
So for leaders, for me and you and our working relationship, I know this to be true, that the 6 wing comes in mostly as an owner. And so I can almost guess sometimes what you might be going through. So for those of you listening, the beauty of the wings for us is to be able to take the guesswork out of it. It's almost like you can relate. That's where the empathy comes in. Like because I know her type so well, and I know the tendencies to go towards other stress patterns and growth patterns, I can see it when it's actually happening. Okay. There's also the balancing act that we go through with our wings. So your wing can serve as a balancing force. If your core type's traits are particularly intense or challenging, your wing can moderate those traits to some extent, leading to a more well-rounded personality. So, you know, if I am a 9, like we just talked about it. I had this one wing that was pulling me towards a direction, but I'm aware enough to know that that's going on. So I used my other wing to pull me out of it. I used the strong verbal communication person who's
8.
Yes, my 8 wing to pull me out of that sort of scary one place that I was in.
Yeah.
So it helped me balance and juggle.
Absolutely. The other thing, I think we spoke to this, and again, we'll just put the list of what we're saying here that the wings can do, and then you can reference it through the website. We'll put it in the show notes. And again, we've talked around this, but it's the insight into relationships. And so when you understand your own type and wing relationship, you can provide insights relative to your interaction with,
Yes.
when you're interacting with others.
Yes.
And I remember the day that I realized what was happening inside of me, that I have different roles. I am an owner. I am a CEO. I am a mother. I have these different roles. And so that's often where the nuances can come in to play. Right. And so
what am I in right now?
Right. And it helps us understand why we might connect or clash with others as well. Yeah. And that is huge permission. Marcy and I have been very open about it a number of times on this podcast, and certainly in our company. Marcy and I could butt heads. Well, there was a reason for that. 7s go to 1 in stress. So when I was stressed out, I was acting in a particular way that Marcy knew very well, and she didn't like it because it was how she can potentially show up. And so, but then again, we could also find this mutual connection and love, because she goes to 7 in growth, and hell, we'd have a grand old time, right? And so it should be just that. Ways to foster deeper connections with people. It's not just what we know about ourselves, but what we can understand about others. And that's, to me, where the beauty happens.
Absolutely. Yes. And then, of course, it's for personal development. Our wings, we have to explore our core type, and our wings can be a valuable tool for taking our personal development one step further. So how? By understanding both your strengths and potential pitfalls, you can work on becoming a healthier and more self-aware individual.
Yep.
Which, quite frankly, is priceless.
Yes. Amen.
So we're going to keep this episode a little short and tight, because we do have more to get into on the next episode, but we wanted to really use this time to introduce you to the wings concept. You might want to listen to this again.
Yeah.
Before we jump into the next episode, which will be next week.
Yeah, I'll interrupt you for a sec. Yeah. I do think that's a great advice, and maybe what you do is you understand your wings, and maybe, the people that you interact the most with in your life, whether that's business or personal, and know that about them, and then go through this episode again, and certainly next week. I think that would be a helpful way to listen through this. Yeah. I mean, listening to it the first time and knowing what your dominant number is and know what your wings are.
That's right.
This is great, but we do want to keep this one of those episodes that you can consume regularly as you meet others.
And if you're listening to this and you're wondering, how do I know like the unique traits of my wings? The good news is we always suggest that you take the RHETI, the RHETTI Enneagram test. If you have taken that one, then it's all in your report. The first time you looked at that report, you probably looked at what your main type was. Maybe you studied the wings, maybe you didn't. But if you really want to know more about yourself and help with context around this episode, maybe pull out your assessment and take a look at what they say about the wings, and that'll even bring you further down the path relative to your wing knowledge.
Yep.
Okay, so Danelle, what do you know relative to Enneagram wings? What do you know for sure?
I think it's important to note that while wings are significant, they're just one layer of the Enneagram world system, if you will. And the core type itself, which is your dominant number, along with other factors as such as instinctual variance, levels of development and integration and disintegration, all of these things, which is stress and growth, all of these things contribute to the complexity of the individual's personality. Like I said before, we are not these linear creatures.
Yes.
We have many layers of nuances, and I guess the word is complexity, right? Because that's what it means to be human. And especially, I think we become a little bit more complex when we try to not understand this stuff and to not be curious about why you're reacting to things. You just push it aside. You just say, oh, I don't want to feel that, so I'm not going to acknowledge it. I think that that's a level of complexity that is absolutely unhealthy. It is not a way, and I did it for years, so I know. And while sometimes this stuff can be difficult to navigate at times, it also, the freedom that it gives is so much worth the time that it takes and the stickiness of realizing certain aspects of who you are. But again, that freedom and that acceptance is worth all of it, in my opinion. And it's what I've experienced both personally and professionally, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. And again, we're trying to gradually add ways for you to learn even more about yourself. That's why we're staying committed. Obviously, you love the content on Enneagram, as Meg said at the beginning of the episode, but we also know that the deeper we go with this, the more beneficial it's going to be to...
Absolutely.
Because of what we've experienced, but certainly for all of you, our listeners. And, you know, we just had the episode prior to this episode where we talked about what's new for Self Smarter. And by the time this episode airs, there's a resource out there for you. And it's our comprehensive yet condensed what we think all of us need to know about the Enneagram. And so we've read the books, we've listened to the podcast, and now we're putting that in a format that allows you to get through the information more in an easier way, I think.
Right.
Then pay attention to the sources, because we're providing all the sources that we use to summarize that information.
That's right.
So then if you want to go deeper, definitely go read The Road Back to You, or whatever all of our sources are going to be. And certainly I'm sure some of those sources are going to be our podcast. So there's just, it's a lot. It's a lot to understand, but to me, the understanding is not difficult. It's just in depth.
Yeah. And
because it should be for us. It should be, we shouldn't stop at, oh, you're an introvert, you're extrovert. No, that's not enough. Or you have this type of communication style. It's not enough.
Right.
And that's why we love and celebrate the Enneagram. So that's what I know for sure.
Okay. Wonderful. All right. With that, let's transition to music moment and let's talk about Taylor Swift again.
Oh, she's again
popular.
Yes.
Well, I mean, around here.
Yeah, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
She is a big deal.
She is a big deal. And such a big deal, I wanted to cite, what I wanted to talk about specifically today is citing a Wall Street Journal article. In fact, if you were to Google this, you're going to find other places where people are talking about this. But relative to the economy, this Wall Street Journal article says it's Taylor Swift's economy and we're all living in it. I think that's the name of it.
Wow.
And this article suggests it's simple Taylornomics.
Okay.
So it has a name.
All right.
When Taylor Swift comes to town, Swifties go on a spending spree. Her fans have been filling hotels, packing restaurants, and crowding bars during Swift's 20-city Eras tour in the U.S., which is wrapping up today.
Oh, it is?
Yes, and she's moving globally, and I think she's starting in Mexico.
Okay.
So if, again, if this is, I know I say this all the time, but if this is 2026, welcome back to 2023. Cities say the tour has helped them recover from the economic toll of the pandemic by bringing back tourists and money in their wallets.
Yep.
The Eras tour, which started in March and ends in the U.S. on August 9th, I just saw on the news today, it's actually this weekend, I think she added some dates, is on track to become the biggest in concert history, potentially grossing $1 billion. It's filling football stadiums that hold more than 70,000 people, and Swift is often staying in town for several days, giving local businesses time to soak up the Swiftie money, because wherever she goes, people will follow.
Right. Wasn't she here in Dallas for 3 days?
Yes.
I mean,
yes.
So Dallas definitely benefited, and I was here that weekend, and I didn't know what was going on, but I quickly figured it out because you couldn't get in anywhere to do anything.
Right.
And so, yeah, I think it's amazing. And you think about what this artist has been through, and we have talked about that previously, but if you're just here for the first time, if you think about the perseverance.
Oh, man.
And if you've watched her documentary, what she went through. Oh. And it wasn't just the issue with, was that Kanye that did that?
On the stage.
Was it Kanye?
It was Kanye.
Yeah, okay. And but it was a lot of different things.
Mm-hmm.
She was just ridiculed and, and in so many different ways. And all that did was perpetuate better songwriting. And she stuck with it. And she has proven to us all, if your craft and the way you take care of the people that consume the outcomes of that craft, whatever it may be, if you care about them and not the critics and not the naysayers, more than not, the likelihood of your stability is better. And I look at the example she is on, and even just the fact that she's re-releasing albums on her own dime to take back her music. That to me is a statement. It's phenomenal. So yay, I'm so happy for obviously her, but mostly I'm happy for her diehard fans, because they have, and a lot of the times they're women or they're girls, or and I look at the fostering of relationships. I mean, if you look at these, it's moms and aunts and women taking their daughters, nieces, and it's generational.
Yeah, it is.
It's creating a generation bond, and those memories will never be forgotten. And you don't see sad people at a Taylor Swift show.
No, it's like there's no shame in the Taylor game. Like,
and it used to be something it was what is the word? It was polarizing.
That's right.
People either liked her or not. And it doesn't seem like there's the not like camp anymore.
No, what's so funny is one of our friends, our mutual friend Adam, I met him in 2016. He's one of our dear friends, industry friend. He was a Swiftie. He self-proclaimed back then. He was like, I'm a Swiftie. And I thought I thought he was joking. He wasn't kidding.
No, this is like a 6'2".
At least.
Yeah, he's been our bodyguard many a time out on the town.
And he's like, I'm a Swiftie. And I was like, ha ha ha. He's like, no. Really? And I was like, okay. But watching all these videos from this Eras tour, it is, to your point, it is generational. And it doesn't discriminate, sex, gender.
Not at all. No.
So dads are there and they're like, jamming out and dancing and like letting it go. And so that is what she evokes in us.
Yeah, I love it.
She touches on all the Enneagrams and all the Enneagram wings.
Yes.
It just works.
Yeah, she's something else. So keep going, Taylor, and yay for all your fans.
I know. All right. Well, with that, we'll bring part 1 of our Enneagram Wings episode to a close and come back next week, because we're going to have more on this topic. We'll add some links to the show notes that we think will be helpful for you. Remember to tell a friend, especially if someone's into the Enneagram, like we all are. And don't forget to visit beselfsmarter.com. As Danelle mentioned, in a couple of weeks, we will have an Enneagram tool available for you. So we'll hope you go find that there. And until then, we send you into the week with grateful hearts.
Goodbye, everyone.
As always, you can connect with us on Instagram and Facebook at Self Smarter Podcasts. You can also leave a rating or review if you enjoyed what you heard today. Not only does this mean so much to us, but it also helps other leaders and future leaders find our community. Thank you for taking time out of your day to join us in becoming Self Smarter. This podcast is produced by Snacks Media, and music is from a free platform. Well, that is until Brandy Carlisle reaches out to us to write the original score for our podcast. Friends, have a great rest of your day.